5 centuries ago, a genius left a puzzle on a wall in Milan, and we're still trying to solve it today. Leonardo da Vinci's The Last Supper isn't just a painting. It's a mystery wrapped in pigment and plaster, a codex of hidden symbols and secret messages that continue to baffle and fascinate us half a millennium later. This massive mural, spanning nearly 30 feet of dining hall wall in Santa Maria del Grazie, depicts far more than a simple biblical scene. It's a masterclass in perspective, a psychological study of human emotion, and possibly even a repository of heretical ideas, all hidden in plain sight. First things first, let's talk about one of Leonardo's secret weapons, perspective. He was a master of it, and he used it to full effect in The Last Supper. Take a look at the room where Jesus and the disciples are gathered. Notice how all of the lines in the ceiling, the walls, and even the tables seem to converge at a single point? That point is right at Jesus' right temple. This isn't just a coincidence. It's a deliberate choice that makes Jesus the literal focal point of the entire composition. Everything in the painting draws your eye to him, but Leonardo doesn't stop there. He also used light to emphasize Jesus. The windows behind Christ let in a soft glow, creating a subtle halo effect. It's as if the light of the world is emanating from Jesus himself. Pretty clever, right? This use of perspective and light does more than just make the painting look good. It adds layers of symbolic meaning, emphasizing Jesus' importance and divine nature without resorting to the literal halos often used in religious art of the time. Now, let's zoom in on the figures in the painting. Leonardo arranged the disciples into 4 groups of 3, with Jesus at the center. This arrangement is no accident, it's packed with meaning. First, the number 3 pops up a lot here. 3 windows behind Jesus, 3 disciples in each group. This is likely a reference to the Holy Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, a central concept in Christian theology. But the real drama is in how these groups are reacting to Jesus' shocking announcement. Let's break it down. On the far left, we have Bartholomew, James Minor, and Andrew. They look surprised and skeptical. Bartholomew is even half rising from his seat, as if ready to challenge what he's just heard. Next, we have Judas, we'll come back to him, Peter, and John. Peter looks angry and is clutching a knife behind his back. John, the youngest disciple, looks like he might faint. On Jesus' right, we see Thomas, James Major, and Philip. Thomas is raising his finger, foreshadowing his future doubt about Jesus' resurrection. James has his arms outstretched in shock, while Philip seems to be asking for an explanation. Finally, on the far right, Matthew, Thaddeus, and Simon are in deep discussion, trying to make sense of what's happening. Each group tells its own mini-story within the larger narrative, showcasing Leonardo's brilliant storytelling through art. Now, let's focus on perhaps the most intriguing figure in the painting, Judas. In earlier versions of The Last Supper, artists often separated Judas from the other disciples or gave him obvious villainous features. But Leonardo does something different and much more psychologically complex. Judas is right there in the mix with the others, but he's shrouded in shadow, clutching a small bag, presumably containing the 30 pieces of silver he received for betraying Jesus. He's also knocked over the salt cellar, which some interpret as a reference to spilled or wasted life. But here's where it gets really interesting. Judas and Jesus are both reaching for the same piece of bread. This is a direct reference to the biblical account where Jesus says the betrayer will be the one who dips bread in the dish with him. Leonardo's portrayal of Judas is not as cartoonish villain, but as a complex human being caught in a moment of inner turmoil. It's a masterclass in using subtle details to tell a deeper story. Now, let's address one of the biggest controversies surrounding the Last Supper. See the figure to Jesus' right, the one with the flowing hair and delicate features? Traditionally, this is identified as John, the beloved disciple. But in recent years, some have suggested a shocking alternative. Could this actually be Mary Magdalene? This theory gained popularity with Dan Brown's novel The Da Vinci Code, but it's been around longer than that. Proponents point to the figure's feminine appearance and the way it seems to form an M shape with Jesus when you look at their outlines. But hold on, before we get carried away, let's consider a few things. First, Leonardo was known for painting youthful, somewhat feminine-looking men. Just look at his Saint John the Baptist for another example. Second, the idea of Mary Magdalene being at the Last Supper goes against the biblical account and centuries of artistic tradition. Most art historians agree that this figure is, indeed, John. Now, Leonardo wasn't just an artist. He was also a scientist, engineer, and mathematician, and he loved to incorporate his wide-ranging knowledge into his art. The Last Supper is no exception. Let's start with the numbers. The disciples are arranged in groups of 3. There are 3 windows behind Jesus, and Jesus himself forms a triangle shape. Some researchers have even suggested that the proportions of the painting correspond to the golden ratio, a mathematical concept often associated with aesthetic beauty. But the numerical symbolism doesn't stop there. Some have pointed out that you can find the Fibonacci sequence in the painting. 1 table, 1 central figure, Jesus, 2 side walls, 3 windows, 5 groups of figures, including Jesus, 8 panels on the walls, and 13 individual figures. While it's debated whether Leonardo intentionally incorporated this sequence, it's an intriguing possibility. There are other more subtle symbols too. The food on the table isn't random. Each item could have symbolic meaning. The fish might represent faith, while the bread and wine foreshadow the Christian Eucharist. Even the spaces between the figures have been subject to interpretation. Some musicians have claimed that the disciples' positions and the loaves of bread on the table form a musical score when read from right to left. While this theory is controversial, it speaks to the endless fascination this painting holds for viewers. In The Last Supper, hands tell stories of their own. Leonardo was fascinated by hands and their expressive potential, and he put this interest to good use here. Look at Jesus' hands. His left hand is palm up, open, perhaps offering something. His right hand is palm down, as if blessing the bread and wine. These gestures reinforce his central role in the narrative and foreshadow the Christian sacrament of communion. Now check out Peter's hands. One is gripping a knife behind his back. His other hand is on John's shoulder, connecting 2 of Jesus' closest disciples. Thomas, famous for his future doubting, has his finger raised in a foreshadowing of his desire to touch Jesus' wounds after the resurrection. And Judas, clutching his bag of silver, is the only figure whose hands are hidden below the table, perhaps symbolizing his deceit. By focusing on the hands, Leonardo adds layers of meaning and emotion to each figure, turning a single moment into a complex narrative. I bet there are still secrets hiding in this masterpiece that we haven't uncovered yet. That's where you come in. What did you think of these hidden meanings? Did you spot something that we missed? I'd love to hear your theories and insights, so make sure to leave a comment below. If you enjoyed this deep dive into art history's greatest enigmas, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. And hey, want to be the first in the know when we drop our next video? Hit that bell icon.